Hello, welcome everyone. So happy to have you joining us today. I'm going to give just a few seconds here, a minute or so, for everyone to get onto the webinar site. And as we're doing that, I'd like to introduce myself to you. I am Lori Candela, and I'm so happy to be here today, really to be a part of this webinar as the host. And this exciting webinar is Communicating with Presence for Women Leaders. We here at the Connecticut chapter of the International Coaching Federation, also known as ICF, are excited that today's terrific offering is part of the Raise the Bar webinar, 5 Themes, 5 Days of Learning webinar series that we're offering during International Coaching Week. Brings together individual professional coaches representing a wide variety of coaching specialization as part of the International Coaching Week. During International Coaching Week, International Coaching Federation members worldwide celebrate the power of professional coaching to positively impact individuals, organizations, communities, and the world. Connecticut's Raise the Bar webinars began yesterday on May 4th and will be running all the way through the end of the week on Friday, May 8th. So for a full schedule of offerings, you can find that on our website, which is ICF-CT.org, and feel free to join us for more. Just a few housekeeping things. I know many of you may be already what we call zoomed out or feeling Zoom exhaustion, but I do know that there are some of you who may not be as familiar with Zoom. So just a quick couple of basics. Although you'll be able to see and hear our presenter, Karen, and myself, we won't be able to see you. So know that the best way for us to communicate is by using the chat box at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to interact with each other and also to put in your questions or comments, or if Karen asks you to respond to something, you can put your response in there as well. Of course, if you have any questions or issues around the technology, once again, you can use that. If you'll notice in the chat, there is a drop down where it says to, and it says all panelists and attendees. If you prefer to have just the panelists, which are Karen and myself, see your message, you can click the drop down and then click on all panelists. So let me introduce you to our presenter today. Karen Kirchner is an executive coach with a 20-year track record of catapulting clients to greater levels of leadership effectiveness. Her HR background and unique blend of intelligence, insight, and creativity have made her a trusted partner to an impressive list of organizations, from Fortune 500 companies to technology startups. Karen is co-founder of Her New Standard, the Playbook for Women Leaders, a company that accelerates women in leadership. She holds a master's degree in HR management and received coach certification through the CTI and ICF. She is a former adjunct professor at Fairfield University's Graduate School of Business. So with that, I welcome Karen.
Thank you, Lori. I think
I did not see you. So let's get your video started. There we go. All right. Thank you, Karen.
Thanks, Lori. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm excited to cover this topic with you because it's something that's near and dear to my heart. So we at Her New Standard actually think a lot about presence, because in our programs, we have a 6-month leadership boot camp for women and a 4-month virtual program. And in each of them, women are asked to go get feedback from people they work with in their organizations. And invariably, we hear something about presence. And when women are told they need better presence, they often don't know what that means. It's sort of a fuzzy concept. So my objective today is to share with you what I've learned, what we've learned about presence, and some tools and tips to enhance your presence, no matter where you are on that spectrum, and ways to help your clients also improve their presence. Particularly, we're going to be focusing on the communication aspect of presence. 4 elements of communicating with presence. They're actually the 4 C's. I'll introduce a couple tools that help. And we'll talk about 2 traps that really lessen impact. I really invite you to, I would like this to be interactive, and I invite you to raise your hand if you have something to share. Write in the chat box. There's going to be a couple times that I ask you to write, and really appreciate your input so that A, you get more out of this, and B, I know that you're out there because I'm used to being able to run these with seeing people's faces. So I do see that we have 33 people, which I'm excited about. So I want to start this topic off by asking you to think about someone who has a strong and effective presence. Maybe it's a leader who shows up in a way that's very impactful. Maybe it's a neighbor, a friend, a coworker. Maybe it's you. But actually, I'd prefer that it was somebody else who you've experienced, because I want you to really think about what are their characteristics. And I want you to write those characteristics in the chat box. What is it that makes you feel that they have a strong and effective presence? So just jot down what comes to mind. Positive, authentic, confident, assertive, credible. They know their material. They have an ease, good listener, good eye contact. That's an important one. Direct, not self-conscious, friendly, sense of humor, good pace. They smile. Charismatic. Yeah, that's one we hear a lot. They stand up straight. They're authentic and real. They own the room. They're a great listener. And they're honest, knowledgeable, confident, approachable. No hidden agenda. These are terrific. Thank you. I think they point out that we all define presence a little bit differently, but we know it when we see it. And I actually really like this quote from Sylvia Hewlett, who wrote a book about presence. And she says, it's really a combination of confidence, poise, and authenticity that convinces the rest of us that we're in the presence of someone who's the real deal. So why do we care about presence? What we find is that people with presence are not interrupted when they speak. They're listened to, they're believed. They don't really have to convince people too much. People kind of get on board more quickly. And because of that, they can propel a new idea forward. You'll also notice when someone with strong presence walks into a room, they actually alter the energy in the room. So you can tell that they're there. They're not going to be missed. So it makes sense that this is something that we want to refine and enhance because it actually makes our jobs easier. If we can influence people more effectively with less work, that's something we all want to do. So the 4 C's that we're going to cover are confidence, which is absolutely key to presence. And that's both an inner thing, how we feel about ourselves that allows us to show up confidently, as well as the way we express confidence when we're in the presence of others. So we're going to unpack that one. We'll also cover the other 3 C's, which we'll cover a little bit more quickly, starting with the conclusion, being concise, and connecting to your audience. So let's dive into this confidence concept a little bit, because here's another word that we use all the time. And what does it really mean? In terms of presence, we're really talking about sharing our opinion with assertiveness. So not holding back, being confident that people need our perspective in order to make the right decision, that people will benefit from us sharing our point of view. And part of that confidence is commanding the room so that when we speak, people listen. Now, I promised you 2 traps that I was going to cover. One trap is these verbal things that we can fall into that really take away from our impact. Things like apologizing when you didn't do anything wrong. Many women, and I have fallen into this category for years, and I have to actively fight it, apologize all the time. Somebody bumps into you and you say, "Oh, I'm so sorry," even though they bumped into you. Apologizing almost for showing up. And that really, obviously, is detracting from our presence instead of adding to it. We also use endless on-ramps to our points at times. I kind of think that maybe the best thing would be to, or, well, I'm not really an expert on this, but my point of view is, or you probably already thought of this, or then at the end, maybe we have a great statement, but then we say, am I making sense? All of those things are giving people a reason to discount what we're saying. So we just want to eliminate them. We want to stop apologizing. We want to get rid of these on-ramps that are really just taking up time and space and not helping anyone. I listened to a great podcast, which I really recommend, from HBR it's called Women at Work. And this is actually an episode from 3 years ago or so, but still so relevant, on women in communication. And one of the things they said was that to help with people who fall into this trap is that when you use all of these words like, well, I'm not really sure if this is right, but you're making it about you. And you really want to make it about the point that you're making. So get yourself out of the way and just make your point. And I thought that was a really helpful perspective to bring to our communication. I'm just reading in the chat here from Anne Marie. When I ask my clients, what do you know you're doing well? Many of them will start, well, I think I'm doing. I ask them to notice their words and ask them to change the word think to know. The difference in their energy level is incredible. I love that. Yeah, we often say, I think what you should do, and shifting to I know or I believe is a much stronger place to come from. Thanks, Anne-Marie. That's a great idea. I mentioned that confidence is something that needs to start internally, and it has a whole lot to do with our mindset. It's really formed by our beliefs about ourselves, which lead to thoughts and feelings, which lead to actions, and then lead to results that we get out in the world. So I'll give you an example. If I approach this webinar from the perspective of, I don't really know what I'm talking about. I don't even know why I'm doing this. That belief underlying that would be, I'm not that good. I don't really have much to share. The thoughts or feelings that that's going to bring up are, I shouldn't even be doing this. Why am I doing this? And the actions are going to be, I'm not going to show up as powerfully, and you're not going to learn as much because I'm coming from a place of I'm not enough. We all have these, I'm going to call them inner critics, that show up often when we're stressed out about something, when we're out of our comfort zone, when we're challenging ourselves. Maybe when we're in a meeting that we're not typically in, or we really want to impress people. Maybe there's a new senior leader in the meeting. We all have these voices that do not serve us. It's just a matter of how we manage them. So your voice is going to say something different perhaps than my voice says, but what's important is what we do with that when it shows up. And we really want to obviously turn down the volume on that voice and push it aside and focus on what we can contribute, what we do know about ourselves. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But it is important to get clear about what your inner critic says that's getting in the way of your confidence during those times when it's really important to you that you show up powerfully. So I want you to write down either on a piece of paper or in the chat box, whatever Sometimes it's easier on a piece of paper because we don't always want to share these things with the world, but if you want to put them in the chat box, that's wonderful. But what does your inner critic say when you're at that point where you're out of your comfort zone and that saboteur or inner gremlin or the imposter syndrome is showing up? What is the message that you give yourself? Just take a minute to jot that down on a piece of paper or write it in the chat box. I'm not smart enough. Yeah, I think that's a really common one. We tend to think other people are smarter. I don't know enough, not legitimate, I'm out of my element. They can't afford me, so that might be getting in your way. Yeah, not good enough at it. Someone else knows better. I don't get the technology. I tell myself to hold back so men won't see me as pushy. Interesting. My opinion doesn't count. I don't belong here. Yeah. So some of this is the one I tell myself to hold back so men won't see me as pushy. That's really interesting because I think that oftentimes these beliefs are shaped by what either our perceptions of how we're viewed or what we've heard. And the workplace and society gives women a lot of mixed messages about how we're supposed to show up. And there's that whole double bind of wanting to be competent and liked, and it's hard to be both. So that one really resonates with me. Tell myself to hold back so men won't see me as pushy. So thank you for doing that. And those of you who wrote them down on paper, I want you to just notice from going forward when this inner critic voice shows up and label it. Oh, there's my inner critic. Why this is important is that then it becomes separate from you. This is not the truth speaking. This is just that meddlesome inner critic that shows up at times when you're stressed out or when you're challenging yourself. So once you begin to label it, then you can choose, do I want to listen to it? Or do I want to say, okay, thank you. You can move aside now. It's time for me to show up powerfully. So just notice, and you might want to just make a note to yourself when you hear it and what it's saying so that you can really get clear about those patterns. Another tool that really helps, and our participants love this tool, it's so simple, but the women I coach in our Accelerate program come back to this time and time again because it really allows for that pause in our thinking so that we can then choose what we want to move forward with. And it's called the stop method. So first S for stop, you just pause the action. You take a deep breath. And instead of reacting to whatever is going on, whatever voice is showing up in your head, you're just giving yourself a pause and you're observing. What am I thinking? What am I feeling? How's my body feeling? Am I tense? Is there a lot of energy? Am I excited? Just notice whatever it is that's going on. And then proceed toward your values, which is really choosing what you want to believe. What's going to serve me best at this time? Is it to listen to that inner critic? Or is it to think about all the wonderful things that I've accomplished and the people that I'm going to be interacting with, why they need my contribution? And that really gets us to the next tool, which is our inner champion. Da, da, da. This is our friend. So when that inner critic shows up, we can stop, pause, choose to bring out the inner champion. And this is the person within you, the voice that reminds you how good you are, that reminds you of your accomplishments, that reminds you that people need your perspective, that reminds you of all the important things that you have to say, and that you have a perspective that's really valuable. So to get in touch with this inner champion, which is unfortunately for many of us harder than getting in touch with that inner critic, I want you to think about your biggest fan, that person who always has your back, always encourages you, always tells you how amazing you are, and builds you up just when you need it. And I want you to write in the chat box a few things that that person would say about you. So what would your inner champion, that person who thinks the world of you and knows how great you are, what would they say if you asked them about your strengths, your accomplishments? You can do absolutely anything. I love that. I know you can do it. You have so much to offer. You can do anything you set your mind to. For me, my inner champion is my sister. I know if I need encouragement, she's the person I'm going to call and say, okay, I'm worried about this. And she'll always remind me of things that are really helpful, things that I've forgotten, challenges that I've overcome in the past. I love this from Diane. You're probably the smartest person in the room. And I think it also helps to remember that, everybody else has their inner critic going too. So you might think, they might be doubting themselves, probably are, the same way that you might be doubting yourself when that inner critic is showing up. You're wise and capable. You're the smartest one on the board. You should be chair. My friend Sheila tells me I'm amazing, insightful. I have great tools to share with my clients. Wonderful. You're so insightful and have much wisdom to share. Oh, Susan Gannon, so nice to see your name there. Your clients need you and push back when they're scared. You can trust you. Wonderful. So jot down those on your piece of paper so that you remember them. And when you notice that inner critic showing up, I want you to bring out this inner champion and encourage your clients to do the same thing, or other women in your life or other people in your life who may be struggling. Because this inner champion is actually very powerful, but we have to cultivate it. The inner critic tends to get much more of our attention and shows up much more readily. So pull out that inner champion, and I want you to get clear about all the great things that she should say, or that she could say. So write them down on a piece of paper and then continue adding to the list as you remember great qualities about yourself, characteristics other people say about you, accomplishments that you're proud of. Write them down and then you'll start to remember them when you need them. Okay, so that was our dive into confidence. We talked about the inner critic, the STOP method, and the inner champion, and as tools to gaining more confidence. And now we're going to talk about some of those other C's in communicating with presence. Leading with the conclusion. This is particularly important in business because those of us in particular who are more detail-oriented, who tend to dive in and want everybody to understand the whole process that they went through to get to their conclusion, often lose their audience, particularly if they're dealing with styles that are not as detail-oriented. So I recommend that all of my clients think about what is the conclusion? What is the main point of this communication? What am I trying to achieve? And how could I summarize that in one statement? And then, what are 3 supporting bullet points that I could add as backup to this as needed? But they need to be short. And it's particularly important to include why this matters to the business, if this is a business communication. So if I am, for example, trying to sell her new standard to a company, I'm going to start with what I would say is the conclusion, which is women need a safe space in which to develop their leadership identity. And this matters to you because you need your women in senior leadership positions in order for your business to thrive, to get the best results. Then I can go into some supporting bullet points, but I've gotten their attention with that conclusion or that summary statement. And if I get cut off and I don't get another word in, I know that they've gotten the main point that I want to say. And I can't tell you how many people, I teach a communication class at one of my clients and we practice this, and the tendency is to just give too much detail and to start, for some of us, start where we started in our process and build up to that main point. And the danger is there, you never get to it because you get cut off or you lose your audience. So starting with that conclusion is really important. Conciseness, staying out of the weeds, sticking to 2 to 3 main points is really critical for all the reasons that I just said. If people want more information, they will ask for it, but we really need to be attuned to our audience and know when to stop. Watch for the eyes glazing over, watch for people's attention to wander, and really be brief, because the more words that we use, the more our meaning gets lost in all those words. And we lose control over what people hold on to. Whereas if we just start with that conclusion, have 3 supporting points, chances are much better that they're going to hold on to what's most critical. And the 4th C is connecting to your audience. So really listening for what's important to them. And this is hard for us to do sometimes because we show up with a point of view, a message that we want to get across, and we're so hell-bent on getting our message across that we forget to stop and ask questions and listen and react to our audience. So having that openness to learn from people. This happened to me yesterday. I had a sales call with a key prospect, and I was all excited to tell her about our virtual program that's launching in 2 weeks. And I started off the conversation checking in with her and then started to go into my sales pitch. And I noticed that she was not really with me. So I just paused and I said, what's going on? And she said, my father-in-law just passed away and I'm just not in a space where I'm really focused. I'm sorry. And we just pivoted the conversation and we talked about that. And had I not been paying attention to her and I had just gone on trying to get across what I wanted to get across, clearly that would not have improved our relationship or my ultimate results. So we want to be clear about what we want to communicate, and then we want to pause and listen and check in with our audience and really be attuned to their nonverbal cues that they may not either be understanding what we're saying, or they're not open to what we're saying, or they have a perspective that they need to get out. And the more that we can listen for what's important to them, the more that we can then tweak our communication to meet their needs and have a better impact. So this connection is really important in terms of presence, because, and it's an important reminder that presence is not all about us. It's about the people that we're trying to impact. And we need to really be attuned to them. So I'm going to pause and ask what questions you have at this point, and feel free to unmute yourself, raise your hand, and we'd love to hear from you, or write in the chat box. Also, if you have additional gems to share, some of you have been in the chat, that's really welcomed as well. Other things that you found are helpful when helping your clients to communicate with presence. Thank you, Dina. Dina says, I love your tools because I think they go deep and are not superficial strategies. Lynn earlier had said, your clients need you and push back when they are scared. Yeah, I think that's true. They do push back when they're scared. And we need to maintain our presence, right? Even when our clients push back, and trust ourselves. Deep listening is key. Dancing in the moment as well, just like you said, to pivot. Absolutely. What exercises do you find most helpful to support clients in developing these skills? One of the things that I think is really important with communication is practicing out loud. Clients don't, they're not always jumping up and down to role play. However, we get people in our leadership boot camps, we get them up and presenting in front of each other several times, and we videotape them. And people don't like being videotaped. None of us do. However, that's when we see what's really working for us in terms of our presence and what's getting in our way. And when I teach this class at one of my clients, and we go into more detail on different aspects of communication, one of them we really dive into is nonverbal feedback or nonverbal communication. And I have them pair up and deliver a difficult message to their partner. They're role playing some difficult news they have to communicate. And the partner tapes them on their phone, and they watch themselves, and they get feedback from the partner about, what am I doing nonverbally that's getting in my way? And what am I doing that is adding to my presence and my impact? And that's tremendously helpful, because we're all doing things all the time that either enhance our presence or they detract from it. And if we don't know what they are, we can't do anything about eliminating those ones that are, or managing the things that are getting in our way. So I think it's really important to give your clients feedback on how they're showing up, how they're communicating, and role playing with them and videotaping. Anne Marie says, stay curious, absolutely important. Richard, as a man, these points for women also apply to me. Absolutely. That's great to hear, Richard. That's a good reminder that men have those inner critics and inner champions too. And sometimes they manage them better, but we've all got them.
Karen, we have, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Another question. What part is the hardest part for them to get when you are guiding women in leadership?
What part is the hardest for them to get? I think the part that takes the most practice is managing that inner critic and really noticing when she shows up, because our inner critic can be very devious. They show up in lots of different ways, and sometimes they seem to be protecting us, so we think it's really important to listen to them. And getting clearer about when that voice is actually serving us and when it's not is so critical to then being able to enhance your contribution, to have more impact, to get your voice heard. So really unpacking those voices that show up that are tending to keep our clients small, I think is the part that probably takes the most work. Great question, thank you. Susan also said, one thought is to enlist someone in the room with you to help when they notice you are going off. Yeah, I love that. So if you know that you tend to go into too much detail, then you have somebody in the room who gives you a little signal. maybe they tap their shoulder or something inconspicuous to let you know, and you know to check in with them visually and see if you're doing that. I was just working with a woman leader yesterday who has actually, she has a lot of presence. She almost has too much presence. When I did her 360, what I was told is that she takes over conversations because she's really articulate and really passionate, and she has a lot of great things to say, and she's really an expert. And we really had to talk about why that isn't always a good thing, why she needs to turn it down a little bit or make sure that she is also giving other people room to contribute. And she said what she's learned to do is to realize when nobody else has talked for a while and to stop herself, make herself pause and check in with her audience. So that's it's kind of a refreshing challenge to have too much presence, right? That's not usually what we hear or what we deal with. Monica says, I'm curious about whether your clients are encouraged to journal the process and see how their language about themselves changes. We do encourage our participants to journal. I think we could do a better job on having them go back, at the end of the 6 months or the 4 months, to go back to the beginning and look at how it's changed. I really like that idea. I don't think we do as much of that as when they learn a new concept or they've gotten some new information about themselves. We ask them to journal about that. But I love that idea, Monica. Thank you. All right, we're going to continue on, and then we'll have more time at the end for questions as well. So I mentioned the nonverbal part, and there are a bunch of, these are another set of traps that we as women fall into, and some men do as well. And they're really important to manage them because they detract from our presence. One is tilting the head. So, when you do this, I thought that maybe we could do this. It's not as powerful as when I'm sitting up straight and my head is positioned straight. Self-comforting. These are the gestures that we do when we're nervous. It might be playing with our hair. It might be rubbing our faces. Might be, some people sort of cover their mouths when they speak, which really makes it hard to hear them. So pay attention to what you do when you are nervous and try to manage those tics, particularly when you're communicating something important. The other thing, oh, I love Judy's comment. Interesting. I learned from moment therapist, or maybe it's a movement therapist, that tilting the head is the universal symbol for making an I want to play connection. Oh, interesting. So it's sort of playful. That's I always think of dogs like tilting their head when they don't understand what you're saying. But yeah, it is kind of playful. And there's a time and a place for it, obviously, but an important meeting is not that time. Minimizing space. So this is one that I love watching, a meeting when women and men come into the room. Men tend to spread out, take up lots of space. They put their stuff wherever they want to. They sort of, cross their legs and put their arm over the next chair. Very comfortable. Women, we tend to come in, we have all our things, we put them right in front of each other, or of ourselves. We make ourselves sort of small. Sometimes we even cross our arms or hold our shoulders, and it's like we're trying to fit into this little space. And sometimes we don't even sit at the table, which is the worst thing we can do. Sometimes we sit at the back, against the wall, because other people might want to be at the table. Obviously, this does not help our presence. We need to walk in that room knowing we have an important perspective to share, sit down at the table, and take up some space. Giving a weak handshake. This amazes me that this still happens, but a lot of women I think it's not wanting to be too aggressive. I don't know, they have like a Casper milk toast kind of handshake, and it just immediately gives the impression that they're not powerful. Head nodding. This is one that I fall into. I have to really watch when I agree with something. And it's like an over-agreeable kind of behavior, but again, detracts from presence. So it's really good that I can see myself on Zoom, and we do a lot of our work by Zoom, so I can see if I'm nodding too much, and then I can stop. We've got a comment from Justine. Good point, Judy. Some nonverbal cues are different across different cultures. Eye contact is one that comes to mind. Yeah, that's very true. I know in some Asian cultures, direct eye contact is seen as disrespectful. So there is a cultural element to this, absolutely. And here in the States, having that eye contact is really important and shows confidence, and in other cultures, it's not appropriate. So thank you for that watch out, Justine. Are there any other communication traps, either verbal or nonverbal, that you know you fall into or that your clients fall into that you want to add to our lists? Because we talked about the verbal ones, we talked about the nonverbal ones. Yes, that's a big one. We have to watch the ums. Backtracking, stalling, yeah, any kinds of phrases that we repeat a lot, after a while they become distracting to our audience. So that's another great reason to be videotaped and to listen to yourself, because you hear those verbal tics. What is your thinking about smiling, especially as it relates to perception of women? I am a big fan of smiling for men and women, and I'll tell you why. I used to teach presentation skills for years, and it's amazing how much it relaxes you when you smile, and it relaxes your audience. It's like everybody exhales when you smile. It warms up the room, and it shows confidence. I think you have to be confident to smile, or at least you appear more confident when you smile. So I'm a big fan. Failure to contribute, thinking I am less than. Failure to contribute, thinking I am less than. So when people are not contributing because they're thinking that they're less than others, that's definitely a trap people fall into, absolutely. Not sitting at the table, not speaking up, waiting till everyone else speaks before you do. Yeah, that's a real trap for introverts. Introverts tend to be last to speak or later to speak. They're formulating their thoughts, they're thinking, they're watching the room. And oftentimes, the longer you wait, the harder it gets to get in that conversation. So I coach my introverts to say something in the first 3 minutes of a meeting to overcome that tendency to hang back. And then once you do it, it's easier to do it again. Looking up from your notes and smiling, absolutely. Talking too quickly to get the speech over with, yes. Most of us do, when we're nervous, speak more quickly. I find extending loving energy into the whole room helpful and helps me own my authority as a facilitator. That's lovely. I think that that reminds me of something that I do myself and I coach my clients to do is, before you walk into an important meeting or you jump on an important call, to just take a moment and be mindful of who you want to show up as in this interaction. And just that breath, it's like the stop method. You take the breath, you think about, who do I want to be in this meeting? And I try to connect to, what do I want to give other people in this interaction? Because if I can focus on others and it becomes less about me, that diminishes my nerves, that diminishes my inner critic, because it becomes about, how can I help these people? And I think for many of us, that helps us to connect to that inner purpose that makes it easier for us to shine and to share our wisdom. Another verbal tick is adding, you know, at the end of the statement. That is a really good one. You know, the other thing that women tend to do is uptick at the end of a sentence, especially younger women, I find, do that. I was thinking that maybe we could do this. It sounds very tentative versus I was thinking we should do this, or we should do this. It's even better. Yes, when we focus on others, it helps us take the focus off of ourselves. Great. Susan added earlier, speaking with a monotone intonation. That's absolutely, does not help your audience to stay with you, so that's not good. Oh yeah, Justine had said rising intonation. Good. Thank you. These are all excellent additions to the conversation. So we talked about the importance of confidence, managing our own beliefs and thoughts and feelings so that then what we project out there is a confident presence. Starting with the conclusion, being brief, sticking to 3 main points, and connecting to your audience. And as terms of next steps, I really encourage you and your clients to get as much feedback as possible. We do 360s in our program, and I always start a coaching engagement with a 360, as I know many of you do as well. And that is enormously helpful because we're all doing things communication-wise that are not serving us, and we don't know what they are unless we ask people. So ask people you trust, how could I enhance my communication? What am I doing that's working? What am I doing that's getting in my way? And encourage your clients to do the same thing so that they can really know where they stand and what they need to manage. Getting clear about that inner critic and bringing out that inner champion are tools that will really help you and your clients. And finding opportunities to challenge yourself. This is one of the things that we find really helps women build confidence. We don't gain in confidence by staying small, by staying in our little box. We gain confidence by taking risks and realizing we can do it. So think of a way to challenge yourself over the next week, something that's out of your comfort zone, that gets that heart pumping, gets you kind of nervous and excited at the same time, and go for it. Because that's how we build that confidence. Those are the things that we look back on and we say, of course I can do it because I did those things. So really challenging ourselves is so important to continue to build our concept of who we are and what we can do. So what is one action you will take based on everything that we shared? I would love to hear how you're going to put this into action. So once again, if you could write in the chat box one thing you're going to do differently as a result of what we've talked about today, that would be great. Richard, I'm going to come back to your question in just 1 minute. Make a note of it. Find opportunities to challenge myself. Excellent. All 3. Great. Acknowledging, thank you, Diane. Acknowledging my inner critic. Stop saying, am I making sense? Great. Women whose natural voice is lower in pitch seem to have an advantage. I'm not sure if it's because it sounds more male, or if it sounds less childlike, or if it's easier to actually hear, but that does seem to be the case. And it's a reminder to me to not let my voice go higher. I like that. Avoiding the traps. Start with a conclusion. Get clear on my inner critic voice. Watch out for detail and doubling back. Great. Stop more often, listen more deeply. Wonderful. I'm going to use the information more with one of my clients. I'll watch out for the verbal tics and try to control those. Developing my inner champion. Wonderful. be concise. Think ahead of what point I want to make. I love that, Catherine, because it does require some pre-work to be concise. You do have to think about it. Great. These are such terrific takeaways, and I really appreciate them. And with our remaining time, I want to invite you to ask any questions that you didn't get a chance to ask yet. And I'm going to circle back to Richard had a question about what are 360s. So that is a feedback tool that coaches often use. And it's where you, either through an online survey or one-on-one interviews, you ask people for their perception of the person you're coaching. So you ask what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are, or how they can develop further. And then you compile that feedback anonymously and deliver it to the client, who then gets the benefit of understanding how he or she is perceived by people whose opinion matters in their organization. So it's a way, and you don't have to have a coach to get 360 feedback. You can do it yourself. You can go on SurveyMonkey and build a survey and send it out to people whose opinion matters to you. And you can set it up so that it's anonymous, or so that you know who said what. Just be clear about to the people who are filling it out how you're going to use it. Or you can just ask people. If you foster those kinds of relationships where people can be honest with you because you're not defensive when they give you feedback, and you really show that you value it, you get great feedback from people in your world who you trust. So I hope that helps. Any other questions? Okay, Holly, if you want to say something in the midst of a meeting, how do you hone in quickly on your conclusion and 3 bullet points? I think it takes practice. I think that the more that I guess it's quickly formulating what is the essence of what I want to know here, and asking that in a question. It's not going to be perfect if you're doing it on the fly, but if you'll find that the more that you train yourself to zero in on the essence of your point or your question, the better you'll get at it.
Karen, there was another question that followed a comment. I think they work well together. Tracy said, I'm an introvert, so I plan to say something during the first 3 minutes of a meeting and stop asking, does that make sense? And Barbara also mentioned, I often say things like, does that make sense? Or some sort of confirming question, just to make sure that they're still with me and verify they're still there and the call hasn't been dropped. I find that the same too. I need to find another question to toss out. Any ideas?
Okay. I like, as a check-in question, because that's a great point. It is really important to check in with your audience. I like to say, what are your questions? So I'm not acting like I'm not making sense. I'm just asking, what are your questions? Or sometimes I say, what's your perspective? And then I'm still checking in with my audience, but I'm not repeating the same thing again, because I've noticed people say, does that make sense? Does that make sense? Does that make sense? And B, I'm not diminishing my own presence in the way I'm asking that question.
What a great answer. That really is something I know I'm going to add to my toolkit. There was also another question in there I don't want to miss. Any watch-outs or tips in this new work from home virtual environment?
Yes, great question. We actually have a video on our website, hernewstandard.com, that is tips and for managing stress for women leaders during COVID-19, which I invite anybody to watch if they're looking for more tips. One of the things that we talk about in there is the importance of nonverbal, of our physical presence when we're doing so much on Zoom. And what we noticed with the women leaders that we're working with is a lot of them are turning off their cameras, or they're showing up in their sweats for their meetings. Now, sometimes I get it. You know, if you've got small kids at home, Sometimes just getting up to your computer on time is all you can manage. But I would avoid falling into that trap, because remember, people, this is the only contact people have with you is via Zoom, or sometimes it's by phone. But if you've got the video capability, use it, because that connection is so important, and because your presence is going to be so much stronger if people can see you. And then hand in hand with that, make sure that you're actually dressing professionally, that you're taking some time to make sure you look like the leader that you are. I hope that's helpful.
Karen, one more. The questions are coming in so quickly. I want to make sure we don't miss them, but I also don't. I want to make sure I'm not repeating one. Holly asked, if you want to say something in the midst of a meeting, how do you hone in quickly on your conclusion and 3 bullet points?
I did cover that one.
You did respond to that. My apologies.
Did.
Let's say, can you ask, are you still with me, rather than, does that make sense?
You could. I think the reason I don't love that question is it's a closed-ended question, so it's yes or no.
Yeah.
I would prefer to throw something open-ended out there, like, what are your questions? What's your perspective? To really invite them into the conversation. That's particularly important if you feel like you're getting no reaction from your audience, or a mixed reaction. You're not sure how it's landing. You really want that feedback so that you can figure out, what is the disconnect? What are they thinking? And how might we need to pivot to address their concerns?
Yes. And then I hear 2 opinions about how close to get to the camera. Your opinion?
Well, I guess it depends on your background. If you have a background that you don't really, first of all, Zoom has the virtual backgrounds, which you can use. I don't love them because they're a little distracting. But there are, I guess, others you can upload that are like office backgrounds. So in that case, you don't need to worry about your background. But if you're not crazy about the background, then I think being closer to your camera is probably better. I think what's most important, and it's amazing that a lot of people don't get this, but people need to see your whole face. And I think it's great if they can see a little bit of your shoulders and a little bit of your body. So many times you see people with only, part of their face, and they're focused on everyone else, so they don't realize how they look in the camera. So really making sure that people can see your whole face, and that you're close up enough that people can see your expressions is important. I don't think you need to be super close up. But I didn't know there were 2 different opinions out there about that. So interesting. Anne Marie says, I'm going to pause here and check in with you all to see what questions you may have. I like that as a check-in. Oh, Catherine's question, is there a soft focus feature to hide wrinkles? There actually in Zoom is a video enhancement feature that you can activate if you have an account. So that's good to know. Yeah, that's part of the reason I don't want to be too close up too. So yeah, so feel free to look for that on your own account. When you go into options, you have to scroll down quite a ways, but you can find it in there. Well, this has been so fun, and Judy says, own those wrinkles. All right, Judy, thank you. See, that's my inner critic showing up, talking about my wrinkles. So appreciate all of the interaction. Thank you for your ideas, your suggestions, your questions. This has been really fun, and I so appreciate all of you joining. And Lori, thank you so much for hosting.
You are very welcome, Karen. Thank you. We really learned a lot from you today. And I know for one, I have some takeaways that I'm really going to work on challenging myself and work with that inner critic and inner champion. Karen, is there a way to reach you if people would like to reach out to you?
Thank you for reminding me to go to my last slide. So, yes, so Karen at Her New Standard is my email. We would love it if you followed us on LinkedIn or Instagram at Her New Standard. And I would love your thoughts. I'd love you to link to me on LinkedIn and would love to stay in touch.
Great, thank you. And Karen also has on her slide a reminder that we do have remaining webinars this week. So we would love if you would join us there as well. Lots of great topics. If you go to ICF-CT.org, you'll find all of the interesting topics, presenters, and registration. So again, thank you for joining all of us today. ICF-CT is a resource for finding coaches and speakers within a wide range of expertise. Don't forget to check the Coaching Week page, as I mentioned, at icf-ct.org for more events, and see what we have to offer in addition to our International Coaching Week offerings. We hope to see you again, and of course, be safe and be well. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.